Hello, everybody. This is the RegiTime podcast for April 2016, and I'm joined by Pat, who's an American player in this edition. He's an American player, plays, I think it's 50-0 full ring Bovada these days. He used to play 10-0 and 25-0, so he's made some good progress. But he has some questions for me regarding, I think, like table selection, game selection, kind of specific to Bovada, but the things we talk about is going to be useful to people who play on other sites too, not just Bovada. But Pat's questions are going to be kind of more tailored towards the Bovada site. So without further ado, I think Pat, you said you got 9 questions. I've looked at the questions, but I can't remember what they all are exactly. So Pat's going to ask them in some kind of random order, and we're going to try and cover as much as we can. So away you go, Pat. You just fire
All
them at
right,
me, boy.
first off, what's up, guys? Like I said, these aren't in any specific order or anything. I just wrote down a few things that I was just curious about. I mean, some things are pretty straightforward, but I feel like some people get a lot of use out of these. So I'll start with the first one. First one is, how should we table select just looking at the lobby? You have the average pot stat and the percentage of players to the flop stat. And on that same topic, what kind of numbers are you looking for?
I never used those stats really when I was playing. I did at first. I used to use like everybody else, and like everybody else, I was looking for high percentage of players to the flop and a high average pot. But you've got to be really, really careful with those stats because they can be really quite badly skewed. If, for example, you and I have been table starting together, and for 5 minutes we've played who knows how many hands, maybe 20 hands, and we've been really going for each other because you and I have some like really aggressive meta game or whatever. So the players to flop ratio is going to be high because we're just heads up, and also the average pot's going to be high because we've been going for each other. And then 2 more players could have joined, and then if we look at the lobby stats from that perspective, we're looking, oh, look at that table, it's got 4 people on it, the average pot's like 35 big blinds, the average player pot's 50, and you think you've found like a really good table, when actually you might just have found a table with 3 or 4 regulars on it, and the stats are skewed because they've only been collected over like a really small sample size. So we need to be very careful about using just lobby stats. Now I know you got some other questions later on that will help us with this a little bit more, but in terms of just lobby stats, I guess we're looking for high players to flop ratio, high average pot, but look for hands per hour. If the hands per hour is quite high, it can be an indication that it's been playing short-handed for a while. So if all of a sudden there's 5 people at the table, but the hands per hour is say 130 or something like that, it's probably an indication that it's been playing short-handed for a while, and those stats actually don't reflect the current state of the table. So just be careful with lobby stats. That's what I would say about lobby stats. They can be mildly useful, but there's way better ways to go about game selecting than lobby stats, I think.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because you can tell when there's a new table that started. Um, I mean, just my general guideline, if I'm looking at the lobby, like starting my session, I pretty much don't even pay attention to average pot. I just look pretty much at the percentage of players to the flop. But then, I mean, you sit down for 10 hands and it's all just a bunch of reggy looking guys. So
Yeah.
you can definitely tell there. And
They're
I've
just better. Oh,
also,
sorry, buddy. Have to carry on, buddy.
well, I was actually going to get into another question if you want to
Okay.
go ahead.
No, I just said there's just better information that we can get quite quickly than just lobby stats. I think lobby stats, like they're really quite they're a very ineffective way to table select. That's all I was going to say. So yeah, if you go to the next question, Chief.
Okay. I've heard actually from an affiliate of mine. This is so I don't know how true it is. I heard that different sites calculate those lobby numbers differently. I don't
I
know if you've heard that also, but I mean it kind of makes sense because I have a few different options, and some of the game they have similar numbers, but then when you sit at the table and play a few orbits, you can tell that they're not the same game.
I have no idea how they're calculated. I mean, I guess different sites will probably have different lengths of time which they monitor the tables to to calculate them, I guess. I mean, but I don't know. I mean, it could be lobby activity, it could be table activity over the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I guess if it's something that you really want to know about, I guess you could just email the site and just ask them how are the stats calculated. But again, because lobby stats aren't really important to me, it's not something I'd go out of my way to do. But yeah, it stands to reason different sites will use different methods to calculate them. And I guess the only different methods you can have, because players per flop is just a number, average pot size is just a number, and they're all clearly going to be determined by how long they've been recording like the table for. So
I guess that makes sense. Yeah,
it's impossible to know. If it's something you're really bothered about, I would contact the site, but there's probably not something that I'd advise anyone to go looking for.
Yeah, since I guess it really isn't even that important. All right, the next one is how do you decide when a table becomes unplayable?
For me, there's a few things. If I've got a really aggressive regular or two pretty aggressive regulars to my left that are making life difficult for me, I need a bloody good reason to sit at the table. I need one premium, like whale, fish, column, what you will, to my very close to my right, or I need two pretty decent fish. So if I got two aggressive regulars who are both 3-betting around 8-9%, maybe even more than that in like steal and re-steal spots, I would want to have a player to my right who's got at least one player with at least a 60 VPIP, or two players both well above 40. If those conditions weren't met, having two players to my left just making my life a misery. We can all find much better games than that on a daily basis. So that's one condition where I would leave. Another condition would just be with all regulars, of course.
Right.
And yeah, apart from that, I can't think of many reasons why I would just like what makes tables become unplayable. I guess it's just like when they dry up. I mean, when you get to a spot where there's like basically no losing players left at the table, that's a good time to leave. Or if the losing players aren't losing at enough of a rate to cover the rake, that's another good time to leave. And if they are losing enough to cover the rake, but you're unfavourably seated with some good regulars, again, that wouldn't be a bad time to leave. Basically, as soon as I think my EV at this table, my expected winnings from this table, if I don't think it's a table I can make very much money at, I'll go and try and find one that I can make more money at. I don't think there's that much point in having like some valuable real estate taken up on your screen with moderate tables, particularly at the micro stakes. At higher limits, you might have to. I mean, I doubt anyone's listening to this who plays high stakes, because why would they? But if someone just randomly is listening and thinking that's bullshit, at the micro stakes, I mean, if we're talking anything from 5NL through 50NL, on sites, especially on sites like Bovada, there's absolutely no reason to sit at bad tables, because a good table is just a couple of clicks away, I would imagine. So for me, it's once I look around and think, where's my profit coming from? If I can't immediately, like, if there isn't something jumping off the screen at midday, that's where my profit's coming from at this table. There's usually a cue for me to say, you know what, I can do better than this table.
Right. And there's always so many tables that I guess it's unacceptable to really even stay that long at a bad table.
Yeah.
Sure, it's a pain in the butt, but I mean, it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, well, switching tables in and out is a pain in the ass, but it's going to have a good effect on your win rate. I'd rather have a bit. It's just all part of the job, if you will. You know, we've all got parts of our day jobs that are a bit shit. We don't like doing, but you've got to do it. And switching tables in and out, it's a pain sometimes. You can be like, I want to focus on my games, and I'm constantly looking at lobbies. But if you want to really maximise your like win rate and your hourly rate, ensuring you're always in some of the very best games you can find has to be a part of your strategy, in my opinion. And if I look at the lobby, if I lose a table and I can't find a fresh win in a lobby, I'll typically just start a new table myself, because the very best way to get involved in a good game is to start it yourself, usually.
Right. So to kind of piggyback on that, do you think there comes a point where you're constantly joining and leaving tables that it does more harm than good, just because you're not really developing any game flow, or you're being distracted, you can't focus, anything like that, or you're just, like you said, part of the way it is?
But if you're selecting good tables again, you shouldn't be swapping them in and out that quickly, unless like all the marks or the fish or whatever you want to call them, unless they're all going broke very quickly. I mean, if you're just constantly like swapping a table out and joining a new one without really looking at it, and looking at, is this table going to be any better than the last one? If you're just constantly taking seats at tables and waiting to see if it's a good table, then yeah, you're going to be doing it quite a lot. But if you're actually, when you get rid of a table, if you're actually being quite diligent in joining your next table, there shouldn't be that much swapping in out. Like I say, unless people are going broke quickly, or unless you're on a site where, like Triple Eight can be a real pain in the backside. There's like usually you'll open a table, there'll be one weaker player sat, and it'll just fill in seconds. And if that weaker player's only got maybe 35 blinds, it's not worth playing, and B is going to go broke really quick. So you're going to be in a situation where you are constantly chopping tables in and out. But on Bovada, where at most tables you can have 2 or more fish, I have a hard time seeing that being like a huge issue. But if you find it is an issue, maybe it's just time to say, you know what, this session there's not much around. Maybe it's time to go and do something else and play later. If you are struggling to find good games, maybe it's just not a good time to play right now.
Right. I mean, yeah, that does happen to me sometimes. I'll just be like jumping in and out of games, but just while I'm thinking of it, it's kind of frustrating because there's no data mining. I feel like there is, you can, open up a table while it's in the lobby, but once it's full, it disappears. I kind of feel like the lobby numbers are the only way that I can discern like what's a better table than another one without constantly, searching for a good one.
Well, I don't think that's true, because if you open the table, you can just have a very quick scan round and just go by stack size as an example of how to find if it's a good table or a bad table, because typically the more players that are at your table with a stack size between 40 to 100 big blinds and not actually full stacked, the more players that fit that bill, the better a table is likely to be. If I was playing on Bovada and I was trying to game select or try to just assess how a table might play, because we can't see player names, it's anonymous, I would be looking at stack sizes. And if I was playing 50NL, I'd be looking for how many stacks are there here between like $18 and $40. And the more stacks I could see in that like 20 to 18 to 20 to $40 stack ratio, the more likely I would be to take a seat. And if I saw more people with over 100 blinds, I'd be less likely to take a seat. Now that's not to say that there aren't fish and bad players with over 100 blinds. It's just way more likely they're going to be a regular. The bigger the stack is, there's just more likely to be regulars. So that's how I would do it. I would join the table and I would be looking immediately for stack sizes. And if there was more than one seat, I'd be looking to take a seat as close to the left as the most likely weaker players as possible. That's how I would do it.
Yeah, and that actually makes a lot of sense. That's something that I know. I mean, it's pretty simple. Short stackers really aren't. Well, most of them aren't really that good, but that's not something that I would really take into consideration when table selecting. So that's definitely a good tip for me, anyways. So I'll jump into the next one. We've kind of been over this a little bit, but is it really, when we get to a table, is it as simple as we want passive players on our left and aggro players on our right? Or are we really just worrying about having fish on our right?
Fish to my right is my most favourite thing. Whether someone's passive or aggressive, yeah, I'd rather have aggressive players to my right too. But if it's a choice between having a fish to my right and aggressive player to my left, or the other way around, I would definitely pick the fish to the right, the aggro player to the left. Because if we have a player who's playing like a 50 or 60 VPIP, even having him to our left is nice that he's there, but the fact he's got position on us most of the time, it really does devalue it a little bit. It's just much harder to play out of position, even against bad players, because it's no limit hold'em. And a lot of the time we just don't have anything. It's just hard to make hands in no limit hold'em. How many times have you been playing against fish when they've had position on you and you've raised ace queen, ace king, ace jack, king queen suited, all these really good cards, and it just feels like you don't flop a pair all night, and you're constantly just like either c-betting too often into players who don't fold, or just find your check folding too much. It's nice to have a fish at the table in any position, but having them to our right is like, it really allows us to hammer home at advantage. If they're to our left, yeah, of course we still have a big edge on them, but that edge is significantly reduced. So yeah, if it was a choice between, if I had two seats and there was like a fish and a regular, I would. Which I don't want the regular to my left. As long as the fish is to my right, I'm gonna. That's the way I'm gonna try and set it up.
Okay, and that kind of leads into my next question. Say there's, a whale on our right, but there's two good legs on your left. I mean, when does it not become worth it? Just when they start playing back at you too much and you're just handcuffed, or will you just stick it out and adjust?
No, I wouldn't be sticking it all in and like adjusting to the regulars because I'm not there for the regulars. I'm there for the fish. And if the regulars are making it so difficult for me, which is super unlikely, but if they're making it so difficult for me that any profit I'm making from the fish I'm just giving straight to them, then again, it's a table that's just not worth it. It's kind of what we talked about at the start. If I'm making less from the fish than I'm losing to these regulars that are to my left, then it's just not worth the table's not worth it to me. Don't care how big the fish is. If I'm just passing effectively, because all the money effectively goes on the table in a clockwise fashion anyway. It just goes on even more in a clockwise fashion when it's set up to go that way. Like so, if that fish to my right, then two good regs to my left. They still have way more chance of getting that fish's money. I'm sorry, getting good stacks than I do because as much as I'm taking money from the fish first, I'm getting first chance to isolate him. They're also getting like they've got position on me a lot when the fish isn't in the pot, so it's not really that good of a spot. But yeah, I would still want the fish directly to my right. But failing that, I wouldn't mind just being like across the table from him or something, just so the fish comes in and then the aggro regulars can do what they do, and then we get to be the aggro regular with them. So sometimes that's not the worst spot to be in either. If you're good at picking your spots, it can sometimes be like if it's just a fish regular, you being in that third seat isn't, sorry, in the fourth seat isn't always the worst place to be because they're not going to be constantly isolated. You're still going to get a chance to play plenty of pots in position with him, but you're going to get to do to them what they do to you. So it's not the worst thing in the world. But yeah, ideally, it's not a situation you'd want. But again, it's not one that's that common. It's particularly the games I play anyway. And from what I've seen of Bovada, the games don't play that aggressively. So maybe at higher stakes it's an issue. At micro stakes, I think it's going to be much less of an issue.
You're right. I agree. Are there any days that you just avoid based on the overall toughness of the games? I only ask that because I've noticed that Mondays are a lot drier on Bovada. I know a lot of people are drooling like, oh, I wish I could play on there, but it just seems that Mondays are generally way tighter and less fish. So that's why I ask. I mean, I still will fire up a session here and there, but
sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I don't actually avoid any days. Sunday nights isn't one that I go out my way to play on because I think most players are playing tournaments, so I've never really found Sunday nights to be that good for cash games. I mean, I haven't really done some huge study on it, but so a day of the week I haven't noticed too much. Fridays and Saturdays are usually better, but the rest of the time I think it's pretty similar. For me, it's hour of the day that I look for is like a European player. And I look to try and play later in the days because I'd rather not play with a bunch of like Eastern European players from countries like with the weaker economies who just basically just have like a. I mean, you get a player from Lithuania, he's more likely to be a good player than a bad player, or Estonia, or Belarus, or Poland. So the less of those guys I can play with, and the more of the English players, the Germans, the Dutch, the Canadians, the Brazilians, the better. So I try to tailor my sessions more for when there's not such a heavy Eastern European presence in the game. So, yeah, I think there's times we can tailor our sessions, but as for days, I can't say I've noticed very much around that, apart from, like I said, the Sunday night bit where it seems to me that cash games aren't as good on Sunday nights, and I suspect it's because more people play tournaments and more fish are playing tournaments. But that could just be bullshit, and I could just be seeing something that's not there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely patterns that you notice, but I guess will there ever be enough of a sample to know one way or the other?
Yeah, for example, I wouldn't play at 10 in the morning UK time because most of the recreational players from Western Europe, like the richer economies, they're going to be at work. You know, they're not going to be there playing poker. So when you log in, you see maybe instead of seeing like 15 like British flags in the Triple Eight client, you might see 3. Instead of seeing 10 German flags, you might see 2. You might see a couple of Australians in there. But what you do see a shit ton of is Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Russia. And
Right.
I've no interest in playing against them guys because I mean I don't think they're that any better than me on average. It's just there's not as much money in the games then, so I'm just not going to put a lot of my volume in when there's not much money in the games and like burn myself out playing in tough pools, and then when it comes to good times of night, I'm like, you know what, I've had enough of poker today, and then not playing when the games are like at like peak times for me. So yeah, I think it's more time of day rather than day of the week that I look into. But yeah, there's definitely something in it.
Yeah, that makes
I'm not
sense
sure how
too.
that works in the US though, of course, because um, unless there's like particular states of the US that are less affluent than others, which I genuinely don't know. I'm not sure how well that would work in the states. Bovada seems soft to me, like 24/7.
Yeah,
Whenever I've seen
well,
it.
it is. Um, I would say once the people on the West Coast get home from work, they're I'm on the East Coast, so they're about 3 hours behind.
Okay,
Um, once they get home, then the games are pretty much at their peak.
so that's more when like
So
Californians and what have you get into the games, yeah.
right,
And could that
right,
because there's
yeah.
just more money in California? Would that make sense?
Just a lot of people.
All right, okay, okay,
it's a huge place.
no worries.
Um, so how many hands do you play on a table? So I guess sample size before you decide that that table is just no good. I mean, what kind of sample do you need on the players? If because I mean, just in my instance, I don't really know who anybody is.
Right, so if I was playing on Bovada and assuming that I'm using Hold'em indicator, which I would do if I played on Bavard. I'm not even sure it's against their terms of service or not, but I know pretty much every regular uses it, so it's not like you're doing anything really terrible by using it. I will be looking at it and thinking, if I played maybe so the average number of hands I've got on people is like 20 or so, and I'm not seeing anybody with like a large gap between the VPIP and the PFR or just a really high VPIP, I would say 20 hands is enough for me to say, you know what, I can find better tables. If after 20 hands there's not at least, if I'm playing full ring, if there's not like two players with VPIPs above 40, or if I'm playing six max, if there's not one player with a VPIP above 40, I'm usually saying I could probably find a better table. And this 20 hands is enough to see if a fish is around. It's not enough to learn exactly what kind of fish they are, but it's usually good enough to realise if someone's like a tight or a loose player. You can usually at least start to get a feel for it. If I, after 20 hands, that most people have got a VPIP between like 12 and 24, I'm probably just going to knock it on the head and just think I can find something better. So yeah, I'd say maybe 3 orbits of a 6 max, maybe 2 orbits of a full ring table, something like that. 18 to 25 hands before I start making any like decisions whether to switch a table in or out.
This is kind of related. It's a little off topic, but in regards to like game flow and when you're in game making reads, what kind of sample are you looking for? I mean, obviously, the more hands you have, the better.
And when it comes to
But
stats, we need a lot of hands. If I'm making reads, it's because of something I've seen at Showdown, or it's because I've seen somebody doing something like really unusual in terms of bet size. So that's a kind of read you can get early on. If you see some like random player just like 1 minute the min raise pre-flop, then the 5x in pre-flop, sometimes the min C bet, sometimes the over bet, those kind of things. If people are like really erratic with the bet sizing, you can make a read quite quickly that they're not going to be a winning player, and then it just takes a bit longer to figure out exactly how fishy they are. So that's the kind of read you can make early on. Or if you see someone get to showdown in like reasonable sized pots with like really weak hands, again you can make a read then. And you just got to really pay attention. So in terms of like how long does it take? It takes as long as it takes for something to show up, I guess. And the more attention you're paying to your tables, the quicker you're going to be able to develop those reads. If you're not paying much attention to them, it's going to take longer. If you're paying attention, you wouldn't believe how many people I see that when they're playing, then Spotify will pop up, then YouTube will pop up, then Skype will pop up, then Facebook will pop
right,
up, and they're like, "What are you guys doing? How on earth you're playing on Bavada or whatever?" Information is already in a premium, and when you're not in hands, you're doing anything but looking at your tables, and
right,
it's a really big mistake, and it's a big mistake lots of people play. It's bad enough doing it when you've got a HUD running. To me, if you're on Bavada, you should just be the table. Start your music up before you start if you want to listen to music. Don't watch TV when you're playing. Don't watch YouTube when you're playing. It should be you and the tables, because it's a huge battle for information. And if you're missing pieces of information, you're just giving up so much advantage. You know, it's you just have to pay attention on stars and what have you. I guess you can just people can rely on HUDs. I still prefer not to. I think notes and HUDs are much more effective than just HUDs, but it's semi-excusable. It's inexcusable and bravada when you have to catch an awful lot of it with the naked eye. So
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. Even if I'm not watching TV, I usually have it on in the background. Which
it just has to hurt you. It really does. If you're
yeah,
sat watching 5 minutes of a bit of captivating television and you miss a fish going all in like on the river 3 times and like never getting called, and then he does it to you, if you don't know he's done it 3 times previously, so therefore he must be doing it relatively light. How are you going to know whether to like make a good decision against him or not? You're missing these key bits of information. It's absolutely critical. And
yeah,
it can only hurt
I
you.
totally agree.
I mean, it depends what you want to be. If you just want to be a recreational player, who cares? You know, have your TV on, do what you want. It doesn't matter. But if you're a guy who's like wanting to take poker more seriously, you have to respect the game and you have to pay attention to it. You can't just wing it these days and have like the latest episode of Game of Thrones on and be like checking Facebook at the same time as you're trying to four table, because you're just going to be giving up. Even if you're winning doing that, you're just still leaving tons and tons of money on the table.
Right. Well, that's the thing. If you're winning while you're doing that, just imagine what you could do to your win rate when you're not distracted.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, it makes perfect sense. I mean, and I can say all these things, but I'm guilty of it.
Yeah, and we all have to. I mean, I'm not
sense.
anymore. I used to be, but I'm not anymore. I don't play when I've got any distractions whatsoever. If the wife's still up, which is why I play much later, if the wife's up, the kids are running around, if the TV's on, I just don't play. I only ever play poker when I'm in glorious solitude. And it's just me, it's my 2 monitors, and we're just cracking on.
Yeah. So this is my last one, and then I have a follow-up to it.
Okay.
When do you decide to start tables? And the follow-up is a trick I learned from a friend. I want to know what you think about this. When he sits down at a new table, he won't buy in full. He'll buy in, say it's 25 an hour, he'll buy in for between 15 and 20 to try and attract some fish. And I've done it a few times, and I've had mixed results. I just was wondering if you thought that was worth the effort, if it was a little trick or not.
With all due respect to your friend and to you, I think it's a terrible idea. Because given what we've just talked about how we go about table selecting, how we go about seat selecting, if we're like deliberately buying into because we're not going to attract fish. Fish are just going to sit at some random empty seat somewhere. Fish don't join waitlist. There's no waitlist on provider anyway. But if we're going to cross this to talk about Triple Eight or Sky or something like that, fish never join waitlists ever. They just don't do it. It's just not what they want to do. They're just going to click an empty seat, and they don't even seat select. They just fucking click the seat. They click join table and whatever. So ignore the fact that you want to attract fish. That's not what you're doing. But what you are attracting by buying in for less than 100 big blinds is you're saying, look at me, I'm a fish, or you're trying to pretend you're a fish. So what you're going to do is get regular sitting to your fucking direct left all the time, because that's what we're doing. We're looking for precisely those guys, and we're looking to get on the left hand side of them. So what you're doing there is you're making it much more likely that you're going to get a regular who's paying attention to stuff like that to your left hand side, which is the last thing we want, really. So, with all due respect, it's a dreadful idea. It's possibly one of the worst things you could do, I would imagine. And I mean, no offense to you or your friend there, but there's no point sugarcoating it. It just sounds like a really dreadful idea to me.
It's just funny though that I didn't even think of it that way. You're so right.
So yeah, I definitely wouldn't do that. And what was the first part of the question again? Sorry. When do I start thinking about starting tables? Was it? I think.
Yeah. When do you decide?
Well, if I log into Sky, I'll look first of all at all the tables. I very rarely join a table with like 5 players on, because you've only got one seat to choose from. It's usually not a very good one. So it's very rare I'll join. So I'm usually looking at the tables that just have 2 or 3 players in it anyway. So first of all, I'll log in. Right, who's on these 2 or 3 tables? 2 or 3 player tables. Can I get a good? Is there a fish on? And can I get a good fish? Can I get a good seat against a fish? So that's my first job. If I look at all the tables, just regs battling or whatever, which isn't very often on Sky, but if it was like that, I wouldn't try and start more tables, because if there's already like 2 30-nil tables open with like 2 or 3 players at each. I don't really see the point in starting a third one. The chance of you getting a fish coming and sitting with you heads up, rather than the fish joining the table with 3 or 4 players on. Unless it's the fish who specifically likes playing heads up, he's probably going to choose a table with more players, because lots of people don't like playing super short-handed anyway. So if that was the scenario, I probably wouldn't start tables. I would probably just be like, you know what, these games don't look very good at the minute. There's already lots of like tables and empty seats at the limits I want to play. So I'd either just like sit in and just hope a game develop for 5 or 10 minutes, or I just think it's not a good time. I'm just going to come back and going to go do something else and come back and play it later. When I like starting tables is peak times, because especially on a site like Sky, with all due respect to the Sky regulars, well, with whenever I don't care with respect or not, but those guys just get there 6, 8, 10, whatever the hell they're doing tables up, and they're not swapping tables in and out at all. They only like close the table when that table breaks. So I just get to like just open tables and just play with fish constantly, like peak times. If I start opening tables at like 9, 10 o'clock at night, regulars just don't sit me, because A, they've already got the tables, or B, they're too busy to play me heads up because they've got too many tables running. So then I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to be able to open the tables, and the first player that sits me, at least the first player, and usually the first 2, are going to be non-regulars. So that's when I'll do it. Or I'll do it in the mornings when there's like really low traffic on and there's clearly no regs around. I'll open tables then, and if regulars start sitting me, I'll play them for a few minutes just to try and get a game going. If the game doesn't start, I'll just say to them, look, no interest in playing your heads up. I'm not saying that you can beat me or I can beat you. It's just between the rake and what have you. It's not something I can be asked doing. So I will play regulars heads up for a short while to see if we can get a game to start. But if, like I say, within a few minutes games don't start, you'll be like, yeah, good game, well done, and I'll see you later. So that's when games start.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I got for you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Pat. It's just filled it out nicely. Nice little half-an-hour session. If anyone has any questions outside of these, please do stick them up. If you've got any Bovada questions, Pat might be a good person to talk to. He certainly knows more about Bovada than I do. I'm kind of just speaking from like third-party experience. I would give both of my testicles to play on Bovada because they're ornaments now. I got vasectomy years ago, so they are pretty much just ornamental value. So I'd give them both up to play on Bovada, to be honest with you. But we can't, so we are where we are. So yeah, if you want to ask about Bovada, Pat might be a good person to ask. If you have any questions following up from what Pat and I have discussed, please just leave them either in the Facebook group under the link, or on the YouTube channel if you found it there, or on Reddit if you found it there. Wherever you found it, just leave some questions and I will get back to you. But thank you very much, Pat. I appreciate that. There were some good, intelligent questions that will definitely be on the lips of plenty of players. So hopefully lots of guys listening to this will have got all the way at the end of it and got plenty from it. So thank you very much for that, sir. I very much appreciate it.
All right, yeah, thanks for having me on.
No worries. Thank you very much, buddy, and you take care and be lucky.
All right, see ya.
Bye-bye now.